February 14th, 1933, Valentine's Day. But there's nothing romantic about what's happening in the basement beneath Morningside Pool Hall on 125th Street. 12 men stand in the shadows, each one a professional killer hand-picked by Dutch Schultz himself. Tommy, the executioner Torino, who's never missed a target. Vince, Ice-Pick Delaney, who earned his nickname the hard way. 10 more whose names are whispered in back alleys from the Bronx to Brooklyn. They've been waiting for 3 hours, waiting for one man, waiting for their chance to collect the biggest bounty Dutch Schultz has ever put on a head. $25,000, dead or alive, but preferably dead. The air smells of stale beer and cigarette smoke. Water drips from a broken pipe in the corner, each drop echoing like a countdown timer. These aren't street thugs or desperate kids looking for quick money. These are professionals, men who've killed judges, police commissioners, rival gangsters, men who understand that murder is a business and business is good. At 11:47 p.m., they hear footsteps on the stairs, slow, deliberate, unafraid. Tommy Torino grins and chambers around. Ice-Pick Delaney tests the weight of his blade. 10 other killers prepare to earn their money. The basement door opens. Bumpy Johnson steps into the room, alone, unarmed, 5 feet 8 inches of quiet menace in a charcoal gray suit. He looks around the room, counting faces, calculating odds. 12 to 1. Any sane man would run. Any smart man would beg. Any normal man would already be dead. But Bumpy Johnson isn't any man. He reaches behind him and does something that makes every killer in that room question everything they think they know about fear. He locks the door. "Gentlemen," Bumpy says, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade through silk, "I believe you've been looking for me." Dutch Schultz thought he was trapping a rat in a basement. He didn't realize he'd just locked his 12 best killers in a room with a lion. And what happened in the next 90 minutes wouldn't just change the balance of power in Harlem. It would create a legend that gangsters would whisper about for the next 40 years. To understand why 12 professional killers were waiting in a basement to murder Bumpy Johnson, you need to understand Harlem in 1933. This wasn't the Harlem Renaissance anymore. The Great Depression had hit Black America like a sledgehammer. Banks were closed, jobs had disappeared, hope was a luxury most people couldn't afford. But there was one economy still thriving, the numbers game, the illegal lottery that let you bet a nickel and win $50. For people making $7 a week, that nickel wasn't just money, it was hope. And hope, as any smart criminal knows, is the most valuable currency in the world. Arthur Dutch Schultz had been watching those nickels and dimes flow through Harlem for months, doing the mathematics that would make him the most dangerous man in New York. Hundreds of thousands of people, millions of small bets, adding up to more money than most banks handled in a year. Dutch wasn't just any gangster, he was a special kind of monster. A German-Jewish immigrant from the Bronx who'd built his empire during Prohibition by being more violent than anyone else was willing to be. While other bootleggers negotiated, Dutch eliminated. While others made deals, Dutch made examples. He'd killed over 40 men personally, and that was just the ones people knew about. But Prohibition was ending. The country was going legitimate, which meant Dutch needed a new source of income. And when he looked at Harlem's numbers racket, he saw more than just money. He saw an empire waiting to be conquered. There was just one problem. Harlem already had kings. Madame Stephanie St. Clair ran the numbers game with intelligence and precision. A Caribbean immigrant who'd built her empire from nothing. She understood that power in Harlem wasn't just about force, it was about respect. And standing behind her was the most dangerous man Dutch Schultz would ever face. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, 27 years old, quiet, smart, educated himself in prison reading Shakespeare and military strategy. While other enforcers used their fists, Bumpy used his mind. While others acted on emotion, Bumpy played chess. Dutch Schultz was about to learn the difference between a gangster and a strategist, and it was going to cost him everything. January 1933. Dutch sends his first messengers to Harlem. 3 men in expensive coats who walk into Madame St. Clair's club on 133rd Street like they own the place. Their message is simple: work with Dutch, pay tribute, or get buried. Madame St. Clair looks at these white men sitting in her establishment and says 2 words that seal Harlem's fate: get out. The messengers turn to the quiet man standing in the corner. Bumpy Johnson hasn't moved, hasn't spoken, just watched. That stare, the one that made strong men check their life insurance policies, tells them everything they need to know. They report back to Dutch. Harlem won't surrender. Dutch Schultz, who's never been told no by anyone, makes a decision that will haunt him for the rest of his very short life. He declares war. Dutch Schultz doesn't do anything halfway. When he decides to take Harlem, he doesn't send a few muscle men to rough up some policy runners. He treats it like a military campaign, because in Dutch's mind, that's exactly what it is. I want every policy bank in Harlem shut down by the end of the month, he tells his lieutenants. I want every runner working for us, and I want that black bastard who thinks he can stare at my men dead in the ground. For 6 months, it's a war unlike anything New York has ever seen. Dutch's men hit numbers banks. Bumpy's people hit Dutch's speakeasies. Dutch kidnaps Bumpy's runners. Bumpy makes Dutch's collectors disappear. Bodies pile up on both sides, but neither man will bend. The problem is, Dutch Schultz is fighting a conventional war against an unconventional enemy. He thinks it's about territory and muscle and who has the most guns. But Bumpy Johnson is fighting for something Dutch can't understand: the soul of a neighborhood. Every time Dutch's men hurt a Harlem family, 10 more families side with Bumpy. Every time Dutch tries to intimidate a policy runner, that runner's cousin, brother, and best friend join the resistance. Dutch isn't just fighting one man, he's fighting an entire community. And communities, as Dutch is about to learn, are a lot harder to kill than individuals. By February 1933, Dutch is losing money, losing men, and losing his mind. His other operations are suffering because he's pouring everything into the Harlem War. His Italian allies are starting to whisper that maybe Dutch has bitten off more than he can chew. That's when Dutch makes the decision that seals his fate. Instead of cutting his losses, instead of finding a way to negotiate, he decides to escalate, to send a message so brutal, so final, that all of Harlem will surrender rather than face the same fate. He's going to kill Bumpy Johnson. Not quietly, not with a simple bullet to the head. He's going to make it public, painful, and so violent that the story will be told for generations. A warning to anyone else who thinks they can stand against Dutch Schultz. Dutch selects 12 men, not just any men, the best killers money can buy. Men who've eliminated judges, prosecutors, and rival gang leaders. Men who've never failed to complete a contract. Men who specialize in making people disappear without a trace. Tommy, the executioner, Torino, 43 kills, always looked his victims in the eyes, never used more than 1 bullet. Vince, Ice Pick, Delaney, 37 kills, preferred close work, silent, clean, artistic in its brutality. 10 more specialists, each one a master of death in his own particular style. Together, they've killed more than 300 people. Together, they've never failed a mission. Dutch gives them 1 week to study their target, learn his patterns, his habits, his weaknesses, map his routes, identify his safe houses, catalog his associates. professional preparation for professional execution. What they discover should have been their first warning that this job is different. Bumpy Johnson doesn't have patterns, doesn't follow routines, never visits the same place twice in a row, never takes the same route home, never trusts his safety to chance or predictability. But Dutch's men are confident. They've faced unpredictable targets before. They've hunted paranoid men, careful men, smart men. In the end, they tell Dutch, it doesn't matter how careful Bumpy Johnson is. 12 professionals against one man? The mathematics are simple. They choose their location carefully. Morningside Pool Hall, a basement that Bumpy sometimes uses for private meetings. Only one entrance, no windows, thick walls that will muffle screams. Perfect for an execution. They set their trap. Spread word through Harlem's criminal network that a big numbers banker wants to meet with Bumpy, needs to discuss protection, has money to pay for services, the kind of meeting Bumpy can't ignore. February 14th, 1933, Valentine's Day. Dutch's 12 killers position themselves in that basement like pieces on a chessboard. Each man knows his role, his field of fire, his escape route. They've done this dance before. The music always ends the same way. What they don't know, what Dutch Schultz doesn't know, is that Bumpy Johnson has been expecting this invitation for weeks, that he knows exactly what's waiting for him in that basement, that he's not walking into their trap, he's walking into his. The door closes behind Bumpy with the finality of a coffin lid. 12 guns track his movement as he steps into the circle of light beneath that single hanging bulb. The basement smells of fear sweat and gun oil and the metallic taste of violence about to happen. Tommy Torino steps forward, wearing the smile he saves for moments like this. The smile of a man who's about to earn $25,000 for 30 seconds of work. Dutch Schultz sends his regards, Tommy says, raising his weapon. Bumpy Johnson looks around the room slowly, counting, calculating. His face shows no fear, no surprise, no desperate hope for escape. Just the cool assessment of a chess master studying the board before his next move. 12 men, Bumpy says quietly. Is that all he sent? The question hangs in the air like smoke, because there's something in Bumpy's voice that doesn't match the situation, something that suggests he knows something they don't, something that makes experienced killers suddenly uncertain about their overwhelming advantage. Tommy's smile falters. You got about 5 seconds to beg, Johnson. Bumpy tilts his head slightly, studying Tommy like he's a mildly interesting insect. You're making a mistake. What mistake? You're about to be dead. The mistake, Bumpy says slowly, is thinking I came here alone. 12 weapons stay trained on him, but now there's hesitation, doubt. Tommy glances toward the stairs. Nothing. Looks back at Bumpy. The basement is sealed. No one else came down those stairs. No one else could have gotten in. You're bluffing, Tommy says, but there's less certainty in his voice. Bumpy smiles for the first time since entering the room. Not a friendly smile, not a desperate smile. The smile of a man who's about to teach a master class in the difference between tactics and strategy. Then shoot, he says. Tommy's finger tightens on the trigger. This is the moment that will make him $25,000 richer, the moment that will cement Dutch Schultz's control over Harlem, the moment that will end Bumpy Johnson's reign forever. And that's when Bumpy moves. Not toward a gun, not toward cover, not toward escape. He moves toward the light. One precise punch shatters the hanging bulb, plunging the basement into absolute darkness. For 3 seconds, there's perfect silence. 12 professional killers suddenly blind. 12 men who've built their careers on control and precision, suddenly powerless. 12 predators suddenly feeling like prey. "Hold your fire," Tommy screamed. "Hold your fire, you'll hit each other." But fear doesn't listen to orders. In that darkness, with their confidence shattered like the light bulb, Dutch's killers do what frightened men always do. They panic. The first shot comes from the left side of the room, someone firing at shadows, at sounds, at the terror of not knowing where death is coming from. The muzzle flash reveals position, and 3 more men fire at that position, not realizing they're shooting at their own colleague. Vince Delaney goes down first, not from Bumpy's hand, but from friendly fire. His ice pick clatters across the concrete floor as he realizes that his own teammates have put 3 bullets in his chest. "Stop shooting!" Tommy roars. "You're hitting us!" But it's too late. In that basement maze of overturned tables and storage crates, 12 men are firing blind at anything that moves, including each other. The darkness that was supposed to trap Bumpy has become their prison. And somewhere in that darkness, Bumpy Johnson moves like smoke. He knows this room, played poker here a dozen times, knows every table, every chair, every hiding spot, knows exactly where each killer positioned himself. While they're firing at ghosts, he's moving with surgical precision. A hand reaches out in the darkness, grabs a wrist, twists. The snap of breaking bone echoes through the basement, followed by a scream that cuts off abruptly. "Jesus Christ!" someone shouts. "He's in here with us!" More panic, more wild shooting, more friendly fire. Tommy tries to rally his men, but you can't rally men who can't see their enemy, can't see their friends, can't see anything but muzzle flashes that reveal their positions to a predator who fights better in darkness than they do in light. Another scream, this time from the right side of the room. Someone found Bumpy's hands around their throat, or maybe Bumpy found them. In this darkness, the difference doesn't matter. "The stairs!" Tommy yells. "Get to the stairs!" But Bumpy is already there, has been there since the light went out, waiting, watching, controlling the only exit like a spider controlling its web. The violence lasts exactly 7 minutes. 7 minutes that feel like 7 hours. 7 minutes of professional killers shooting each other, clubbing each other, stabbing each other in a panic-fueled attempt to hit a target they can't see. When it's over, when the gunshots stop and the screaming ends, there's only silence and the sound of someone striking a match. The match flame dances in Bumpy Johnson's steady hand, casting long shadows across a scene that looks like the inside of hell. 11 men are down, some unconscious, some clearly dead, some somewhere in between, making the kinds of sounds wounded animals make. Blood pools on the concrete floor, shell casings glitter in the matchlight like deadly confetti. The air smells of gunpowder and copper, and the particular odor of violence that smart men learn to recognize and fear. And sitting against the far wall, hyperventilating, gun still in his shaking hand, is Marty Numbers Kowalski, the youngest of Dutch's 12 killers, the least experienced, the only one still conscious. Bumpy lights a cigarette with the match, letting the flame die but keeping the glowing ember. In the red light of the cigarette tip, his face looks like something carved from shadow and stone. "You all right, Marty?" Bumpy asks quietly, like he's inquiring about the weather. Marty tries to speak, but only makes a choking sound. He's 24 years old. He's killed 7 men in his career. He considers himself a professional, but he's never seen anything like this. Never imagined that one man could turn 12 hunters into 11 victims in 7 minutes of darkness. Bumpy walks closer, stepping carefully around the bodies. His suit is rumpled but not torn. His hands are bloodied but steady. He looks like a man who's just finished a difficult but necessary job. "You hurt?" he asks. Marty shakes his head frantically. He's not hurt, not physically, but something inside him is broken forever. Some fundamental belief about how the world works has been shattered like that light bulb. "Good," Bumpy says, "because you have a job to do." He reaches into his jacket pocket and pulls out a single playing card, the ace of spades. black as the darkness that just swallowed 11 professional killers. He places it carefully in Marty's free hand. "You're gonna take this to Dutch Schultz. You're gonna tell him exactly what happened here tonight. Every detail, every scream, every bullet that found the wrong target." Marty nods frantically. He'll do whatever this man says. He'll deliver any message. He'll run any errand. He just wants to live long enough to see sunrise. "And you're gonna give him a message from me. You tell Dutch that Harlem belongs to Harlem, not to the Bronx, not to downtown, not to anyone who thinks they can come up here and take what isn't theirs." Bumpy takes a long drag from his cigarette, the ember brightening his face in the darkness. "You tell him I appreciate the warm-up exercise. Tell him his 12 boys gave me a good stretch. But next time he wants to play, he better send more men, because I'm just getting started." Marty clutches the playing card like a lifeline, like a ticket to survival, because that's exactly what it is. Bumpy Johnson could have killed all 12 men, could have left no witnesses, could have made Dutch Schultz wonder for the rest of his life what happened to his best killers. Instead, he's chosen to send a message, a calling card, a demonstration of power that's more effective than any threat, more terrifying than any torture. "Can you walk?" Bumpy asks. Marty tests his legs. They're shaking, but they work. Fear is a powerful motivator. "Good. The door's unlocked. Take the card, deliver the message." "And Marty?" The young killer looks back, terror still etched on his face. "This is the only time I let someone walk out of a room where they came to kill me. There won't be a second time. We clear?" Marty nods and stumbles toward the stairs, clutching the ace of spades. He climbs those steps faster than he's ever climbed anything in his life. Behind him, Bumpy Johnson finishes his cigarette in the darkness, surrounded by the men who came to kill him. The basement door slams shut. Marty Kowalski runs through the Harlem night like the devil himself is chasing him. And maybe, in a way, he is. 8:17 a.m. Arthur Avenue, the Bronx. Dutch Schultz's social club. Dutch is eating breakfast. Eggs, toast, coffee, reading the morning newspaper like any other businessman starting his day. The headline talks about the continuing economic depression, nothing about missing killers, nothing about wars in Harlem. That's when the door bursts open. Marty Kowalski stumbles in, covered in blood that isn't his own, clothes torn, eyes wild with terror. He looks like a man who's seen the face of death and somehow convinced it to let him live. Dutch looks up from his eggs, sees Marty, and goes very still. Because Dutch Schultz didn't become the most feared gangster in New York by being stupid. He knows what blood-covered survivors mean. They mean failure. They mean disaster. They mean someone, somewhere, has outsmarted him. "Where are the others?" Dutch asks quietly. Marty can't speak at first, just shakes his head and makes a sound like a broken animal. Dutch's lieutenants, his accountants, his bodyguards, everyone in the room stops what they're doing, stops breathing, waits. "Where are my men, Marty?" "Dead. He let me live." Dutch stands up slowly, not angry yet, not furious, just processing information like the tactical genius he is. 12 men, professional killers, men who've never failed a contract, all dead. "He what?" "He let me live to give you a message." Dutch's face doesn't change expression, but everyone in the room can feel the temperature drop 20 degrees. This is Dutch Schultz calculating odds, analyzing threats, deciding whether to declare all-out war or cut his losses. What message? Marty reaches into his pocket with a trembling hand and pulls out the ace of spades, still covered in blood, still carrying the smell of that basement and the terror of that night. He said to tell you Harlem belongs to Harlem, and if you want to play again, send more men, because he's just getting started. Dutch stares at that card for a long moment. His men wait for orders, wait for Dutch to unleash hell, to send 50 men to burn Harlem to the ground, to declare total war against the man who just humiliated him in front of the entire New York underworld. Instead, Dutch picks up the card, studies it, then does something that shocks everyone in the room. He laughs. Not with humor, with resignation. The laugh of a man who's just realized he's been playing checkers against someone playing chess.
"He's got balls," Dutch says quietly. "I'll give him that." "Boss," one of his lieutenants starts, "we can't let this—" Dutch holds up his hand, silencing the room. He looks at that ace of spades, thinks about 12 dead professionals, considers the cost of continuing a war against someone who can turn hunters into prey in 7 minutes. "You know what it costs to go to war with someone who's not afraid to die?" Dutch asks rhetorically. "Someone who's smarter than you? Someone who has an entire neighborhood behind him?" He drops the card in his ashtray, lights it on fire with his cigarette lighter, watches it burn to ash. It costs everything. And for what? Numbers money from Harlem? There's easier money. The decision shocks everyone. Dutch Schultz, the man who'd gone to war with Lucky Luciano, who'd killed his own partners over smaller slights, who'd never backed down from anyone, is backing down. But Dutch isn't backing down from fear. He's backing down from respect. Because Bumpy Johnson had done something that even Dutch could appreciate. He'd proven he was willing to die for his principles. And men like that, men who'd rather die than surrender, you don't fight them. You either kill them or you leave them alone. And Dutch Schultz couldn't kill Bumpy Johnson. 12 professional killers had just proven that. The war for Harlem ended that morning in a Bronx social club with a playing card turning to ash. Dutch Schultz never sent another man to Harlem, never tried to muscle in on the numbers game again, never challenged Bumpy Johnson's authority. Word of what happened in that basement spread through the underworld like wildfire. By noon, every gangster from Boston to Baltimore knew the story. Bumpy Johnson, outnumbered 12-1, had turned the table so completely that his enemies were too impressed to seek revenge. The legend grew with each telling. Some said Bumpy had help hidden in the basement. Others claimed he'd used some kind of ancient African fighting technique. A few insisted it was voodoo or dark magic. The truth was simpler and more terrifying. Bumpy Johnson had won because he'd been smarter, better prepared, and absolutely unafraid to die. In a world where most men fought for money or territory or pride, Bumpy had fought for something more powerful, the right of his people to determine their own fate. That basement became Harlem legend. People told the story for decades, passed it down to their children and grandchildren, about the night one man faced 12 killers and walked away without firing a shot, about the ace of spades that ended a war, about the moment Bumpy Johnson became untouchable. The playing card became his calling card. For the next 35 years, whenever someone threatened Harlem's independence, whenever outsiders tried to muscle in on what Bumpy had built, they'd find an ace of spades waiting for them. A reminder that some men can't be bought, can't be broken, and can't be beaten. Dutch Schultz himself was dead within 2 years, shot to pieces in a New Jersey tavern over a completely different dispute. But before he died, he told people that walking away from Harlem was the smartest decision he'd ever made. "You don't fight Bumpy Johnson," he said. "You either join him or you stay out of his way, because that man doesn't just kill his enemies, he makes them disappear like they never existed." February 14th, 1933, 12 men walked into a basement to commit murder. One walked out to deliver a message, and Harlem was never the same. That's the story of the night Bumpy Johnson became the undisputed godfather of Harlem. Not through violence, though violence was available. Not through money, though money was involved. Through intelligence, preparation, and the absolute conviction that some things are worth dying for.
If this story moved you, if you understand that real power comes from being willing to sacrifice everything for what you believe in, then subscribe to this channel. Hit that like button if you believe that one man with courage can change everything. And tell me in the comments, would you have had the nerve to walk into that basement knowing what was waiting? Next week, we're telling the story of the woman who taught Bumpy Johnson everything he knew about strategy, Madame Stephanie St. Clair, the Caribbean immigrant who proved that the most dangerous weapon in Harlem wasn't a gun, it was a brilliant mind and an iron will. Remember, fear makes men dangerous, but respect makes them untouchable. And that Valentine's Day night in 1933, Bumpy Johnson earned respect that lasted a lifetime.